Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamhi, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you for joining me, Ellen Kamhi, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Herbally Yours brings you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. Today, I am so happy to bring on board Sherri Tutkus. Sherri is a nurse, and she's an RN who earned her bachelor's in science and nursing from Boston College. And she is a very active member of the American Cannabis Nurses Association. And I'm a member there as well on the education committee. And she is also a founding member of the Cannabis Nurses Network and on the editorial advisory board of Cannabis RX Magazine. Sherri is truly a leading force in the growing cannabis industry as a nurse, patient, advocate, and activist. She is the founder of The Green Nurse and Chief Nursing Officer at Holistic Caring, a global community of health professionals who provide services to support the utilization of plant medicine and other progressive therapies to nourish the endocannabinoid system. So thank you so much for being our guest today, Sherri.
Ellen, thank you so much for having me. One of my favorite topics, for sure.
Imagine so, because so many things of your YouTube, your LinkedIn, your Facebook, all of those will be listed on our archives after we do our show, so anyone can grab them. It's a lot easier than reading them out over the air. But let's go back in time to little Sherri. What made you wanted to be a nurse in the first place?
Good question. So I'll have to tell you, when I was 10 years old, my little brother, who was 1, decided to go running down the driveway, which was a very, very steep hill. And he ended up tumbling over and over, and he cracked his head open. And I ran down there and I grabbed him, and I literally took my sock off, my shoe, my sock, and put the sock right on his forehead and carried him upstairs. And my mother said, "Oh my goodness, you'd be such a wonderful nurse." And so that's literally how I decided I wanted to be a nurse, 10 years old.
Wow.
Saving my little...
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it was like an inspirational moment.
Yes.
That led you to nursing. Now,
it certainly did.
So many of our nursing colleagues have been called to nursing because of maybe not the story like yours, but a similar desire and perception that nursing would be about caring and health and healing. Mm-hmm. And yet, unfortunately, once you get into it, it becomes an industry that is not always so supportive of health and healing for all clients.
I completely agree with you, for sure. You know, we come into the world as nurses because we care. You know, Jean Watson, who's a nursing theorist, said the essence of nursing is human caring, and that's caring for the entire human experience, for sure.
So and you do something a little, I'm sorry, but you do something a little unusual, as we read in your entry bio, because you are really a leader within the cannabis space, including the American Cannabis Nurses Association. What led you to that? Because that seems at first glance very far afield from conventional nursing.
Absolutely. And I was a conventional nurse working in the space at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, Brigham and Women's and Children's Hospital. So I'm a pediatric nurse, an oncology nurse, a chemo nurse, a hospice nurse. I've done nursing across the spectrum from pediatrics to geriatrics in the conventional system. And I ended up getting sick in 2012 and almost died. And the interesting thing about my story was that not only am I a conventional nurse, but I'm also a holistic nurse. So I practiced in all of the alternative healing natural modalities my entire life. So when I got sick, I was a little bit troubled and a little bit puzzled because I wasn't able to get better. I ended up in the intensive care unit and almost died. And I was on the other side of the bed. I became that patient. And I experienced, I would call medical and pharmaceutical trauma, where it's the pills and the procedures that were handed to me over and over and over again. And through the course of time, over the course of, I would say, almost 2 years, I was on over 18 pharmaceuticals, and I had had many, many procedures, many, many surgeries on multiple pharmaceuticals, and I was sick and I was suffering and I was dying. I literally was dying a very slow, painful death. And I became suicidal. And that's a really, really hard place to be in when you are a single mother of three, taking care of children, being in a career that's thriving. I went from high functioning to not functioning and did everything that the doctors told me to do, did all the pills, all the procedures, all the holistic healing modalities that existed: chiropractic, acupuncture, herbalism, shaman, energy healing, nutritionists. I did the therapists, all of it, occupational therapy, physical therapy, every single thing, modality that you could think of, I did, and nothing worked until cannabis came into my life. And cannabis came into my life as medicine by actually a nursing colleague friend of mine who had just retired. She was a nursing professor who taught at a nursing school in Massachusetts. She came to my house with a joint. And she literally, came to my house and opened up the door and said, "Sherri, you need to get with the program." And I'm like, "You're handing me weed? You're giving me cannabis?" I said, "What is this, a joke? How could this possibly work for me when every single thing that I've done has not worked? All the therapies, all the pills, procedures, and all the alternatives, nothing worked. How could this work for me?"
So, wait 1 second there. Wait 1 second.
Sure.
With all that conventional intervention that you got, what was the diagnosis?
Well, it was a couple of different things. So I ended up getting a bacterial infection while I was working in the hospital. I wasn't the only one that got it, but I was the one that got the sickest and almost died. I ended up getting, you ready for this? Pseudomembranous C. diff colitis. Okay, you want to know what happened?
Yes, please tell us.
Okay, so the gastroenterologist, pretty much when it came down to it, I was healthy. Was not on any pharmaceuticals. I had no gastrointestinal illnesses. I was not on antibiotics. I got pseudomembranous C. diff colitis. I pretty much ate a bacteria while I was working. At the time, I was working between 3 hospitals: the Brigham and Women's, Beth Israel, and Children's Hospital, seeing anywhere between 20 and 30 patients a day, helping get patients home on very extensive, difficult therapies. So I did a lot of teaching, a lot of hands-on, a lot of equipment, but I'm also an infectious disease nurse. So I know the importance of hand washing, and I know the importance of pumping in and pumping out. However, when you have people in a unit, if someone doesn't follow infectious disease protocol, you can have something like this happen, and it happened. And so they weren't able to identify who it was, but they were able to identify the unit that it happened on. Ended up in the intensive care unit with megacolon. So I'm not sure if y'all know what megacolon is, but it's where your large intestine completely starts to expand in a way that is not conducive to life. So my colon almost exploded. And so in intensive care unit for 6 weeks on multiple pharmaceuticals, IV antibiotics, pain medications. I came out of the hospital. I had a very difficult time coming off of the pharmaceuticals, including the antibiotics. They started doing different procedures on me. I was on IV. They wanted to feed me IV. I was losing weight, extremely malnourished, malabsorption. And then what happens with your gut when it's not healing and you're not getting the nutrients that you need, you have that whole issue of microbiome imbalance. And we all know that our microbiome is connected to our central nervous system.
Wait. I'm going to interrupt you there.
Okay.
We all know, such as
we
you.
all know. All right,
but let's back up to know that there could be people listening to us.
Don't know.
Right. Really somewhere heard that word microbiome, and it's very important because it has to do with how you got well, but also that it should be balanced for other people. And the endocannabinoid story is also attached to it. So just tell us a little bit more about that microbiome.
Okay, so the microbiome is really, it's its own entire little universe that's in your digestive tract. So your enteric nervous system is from your mouth to your butt, communicates to your central nervous system via the endocannabinoid system. So the microbiome is really, really important when it comes to how we manage our emotions, the fight or flight response, our immune response, how we manage pain. So I had a complete 100% disruption in my microbiome. I wasn't absorbing nutrients. I wasn't able to get in those micronutrients that our body needs in order to function and flourish. And so all of my other systems started to become affected. The endocannabinoid system is the master regulatory system that regulates all 11 organ systems, our immune system, and all the neurotransmitter signaling systems that give messages to tell our body to either do something or not do something. The microbiome is huge, a big part of it. So without that functioning, I started to have a dysregulation in my endocannabinoid system, and the multiple other systems started to get affected. I developed an autoimmune condition. I developed a lump on my breast. I developed panic disorder, PTSD, and agoraphobia. So these are things that are really, really interesting, because I look at it as if the clinicians, doctors, nurses, and professionals had any inkling of what the endocannabinoid system was, I probably wouldn't have suffered so much, because every single thing that we tell patients to do or not do in their lives affects the endocannabinoid system. That includes all pills and all procedures. So if someone needs a specific treatment or modality, as a clinician, it's our responsibility to know, does this support the endocannabinoid system or does it not? And if it doesn't mean that you don't do that treatment or that modality, but you think of ways to mitigate those side effects to prevent further decline in other systems in our bodies. So it was very, very interesting how the microbiome disruption from me getting this bacterial infection in my gut completely started the cascade, I call it, circling the drain of despair. It was one condition after another, and one specialist and one pill. And before you know it, I was that polypharmacy patient on the other side of the bed, experiencing medical and pharmaceutical trauma. Really a scary place to be in. So cannabis came into my life via a nurse, right? A nurse that was a lot older than me, who disclosed to me that she had been using cannabis since she was 17 years old. So I said, Marianne, you are 70 years old right now, and you've been using cannabis since you were 17. That's 53 years of using cannabis. I don't understand. And she says, well, listen, Sherri, I want to tell you a story. My father's a pharmacist, or was a pharmacist, and he used to carry cannabis in his pharmacy. And so the education started to unfold there. Her story, her compelling story of what she's used cannabis for health and wellness and spiritual tools, and how her father carried cannabis in his pharmacy. She disclosed to me that at one point in time, prior to 1937, there were over 600 cannabis formulations in pharmacies. That's a lot. And I never knew that. And a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, and a lot of actually made by a lot of the drug companies you would recognize today, like Eli Lilly and Merck. They all had cannabis products, and they were used even for children's cough syrups, for instance. They were widely used.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
So around what year was that? Because of course, now we're talking about cannabis. We're nurses. There's actually an American Cannabis Nurses Association. That's a pretty advanced.
Cannabis Nurses Network.
This happened to you? Because now it's becoming also legal all around the country too.
So the very interesting thing. So 2012, I got sick. I was sick and suffering for almost 3 years. At the end of 2014, I found cannabis as medicine. I got my medical card. I started to study. I started to learn. My eyes were opened to the most amazing plant that I would call it the most misunderstood plant in the entire world. And what really propelled me forward was in 2018, the National Council State Boards of Nursing, who puts out, it's the nursing regulatory board that puts out the nursing exam for all nurses to be tested, put out a call to action in the Journal of Nursing Regulation, which is a 64-page document that stated all nurses, nurse practitioners, advanced practice nurses, and nursing students must have 6 essential areas of knowledge when it comes to cannabis as medicine. So when I read that, I said, you know what? I need to do something, because I know I'm not the only one out there. It took me 2 years to figure out how to make cannabis work for me as medicine so I could come off of all my pharmaceuticals and start to live a life again. So cannabis gave me my life back.
That a lot of things there that you shared, really, we could go deeper with. For instance, you threw out the word endocannabinoid system. And a lot of people are surprised to find out that naturally in our body, we actually have receptors put there by who? Well, I believe in God or Mother Nature or whatever you want to believe in. But somehow or other, miraculously enough, there are receptor sites for the cannabinoids that is in this plant, which you might want to call a cannabis plant. Of course, it's been called marijuana, but that name isn't so, I don't know, politically correct right now, although everybody I know uses it anyway. But,
Right.
It's developing other ways to be discussed. But isn't it amazing that in our bodies are these naturally occurring receptors for it?
Yes. Well, this is the part that I found the most fascinating, and the big shoe drop that allowed me to go a little bit deeper into the rabbit hole is that we have an endocannabinoid system, not because of the cannabis plant, but because we make molecules in our body just like the plant that activate these receptors. So, for example, the plant makes THC. We make a molecule called anandamide. And the THC molecule and the anandamide molecule have the exact same molecular shape and do the same thing. The difference between the THC molecule is it comes from the plant, and it's 10 times stronger than our anandamide molecule that we make. That, to me, is extremely fascinating. The other thing that I found extremely fascinating was that we have cannabinoid receptors on all of the cell surfaces of all 11 organ systems and at those neurotransmitter signaling junction sites. For example, dopamine, serotonin, opioid. So we have these receptors, which are like little docks that are looking for the keys. And those are the endocannabinoids that we make upon demand, right? So we make endocannabinoids upon demand to provide balance to all 11 organ systems and all of the neurotransmitter signaling systems. And just to think that big, bad THC molecule that everyone is so afraid of, we make something very similar in our body, and so that's what's so important when we're teaching cannabis as medicine is you don't need a lot of it for it to work in your body. You don't need to be impaired for cannabis to work. And so I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions that we're trying to really destigmatize and educate people on is there's so many different ways to use this plant. And the healing therapeutic potential is so broad and so vast that it's mind-boggling.
So I just want to remind our listeners that you are listening to Herbally Yours on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ellen Kamhi, the natural nurse. And today my guest is Nurse Sherri Tutkus, who, what is one of the best ways to find you beyond the show? Because we have a whole list of green nurse social connections, but what's the best way for people to look for you?
The best way to reach me is to go to holisticcaring.com.
Okay.
And that is our website, and it's an educational website for patients and providers. Within that website, there's a link to our private offline community. It's free, and it's run by all nurses who are also cannabis nurses and cannabis patients. And what we have there is we have a forum for people to come and to learn. It's private, it's off social media. It's protected. We vet people that come in. We have a free introductory to cannabis course, free patient portal, free support group. All of our webcasts are there. And I'm a producer of podcasts. I've been podcasting since 2018, and all of the podcasts are there as well. So we want to have a safe space for people, and we openly interact with people and chat back and forth within that network. So I'd love to invite the listeners to come join us.
And so the best place to go to find all that is holisticcaring.com.
Yep. Holisticcaring.com.
What a fascinating story. So you were up to saying it's not that many years ago. I've been doing cannabis since 1962. Okay.
Whoa.
So a little while.
You're definitely one of the OGs. You're one of the OGs in the network.
I ran a farm in Arizona in 1969, a cannabis farm, and that was in 1969. So it's been, a long road. But it's so interesting that now, things are really opening up in terms of legal access, which is so great because, you can integrate it into holistic centers, although that's still challenging.
Right. But it's possible because when we are working with clinicians of all different types, what I tell them is this: if you're a massage therapist, do you know that massage actually upregulates and nourishes the endocannabinoid system? It can make the endocannabinoid system work better. So with all of the holistic practices that exist out there, educating these clinicians on how they can incorporate cannabis education into their current practice is completely 100% actually helps their practice, because these patients, patients are going to their chiropractors, their acupuncturists, their herbalists, and asking about cannabis as medicine. Most herbalists do know about it. Most plant medicine people do. But just to be able to have those thoughtful, conversations, and to guide patients to maybe be open to looking into, to learning, and to even try some of the products, that exist out on the market today, can be very beneficial and enhance the therapeutic potential with what they're already doing with that particular clinician.
Well, it sounds like in your particular case, you had, was it a miraculous turnaround? Because you were at your wit's end, sort of. And
yeah, well,
found relief quickly, or it was a step-by-step process?
Okay, this is the part that's really interesting. So, what happened is, like I said, I was on all those pharmaceuticals. Marianne, the older nurse, brought me the cannabis joint, and I inhaled. I basically said I had nothing to lose. This is the interesting thing. The first inhale, my head cracked open and consciousness poured in. The second inhale, I relaxed. The third inhale, my pain was gone 100%. I went from a 10 to a 0 in less than 10 minutes. And so I had to look at that. I really had to sit with that and look at that. I didn't understand. I wasn't impaired and I wasn't high. So this really made me question a lot to do with plant medicine and all of this. And she says, you have to learn this. And I said, why aren't I high? She says, because you needed this medicine. And she wasn't able to articulate it because she wasn't a cannabis nurse, but this was the road that I went down and I started to learn. And it was, like I said, it was really, really eye-opening to learn about all of the different things that we do or don't do in our lives that affect our endocannabinoid system. So when I'm working with patients and consulting and coaching and even teaching practitioners, one of the things I tell them is everything that you tell your patient to do or not do in regards to everything: eating, sleeping, what they drink, the supplements they take, the pharmaceuticals they take, the exercise that they do. All of these different practices that we want our patients to do affect the endocannabinoid system. And is it going to support it and make it better? Massage and CBD cream, they go great together. They enhance one another. And so that's what we're really trying to do. We're trying to enhance the therapeutic potential of all these different modalities to find the specific thing that works for each patient. Patients will say, does this work? Does that work? I go, listen, everything works and nothing works. We need to find out what works for you. And that's the bottom line. As cannabis nurses, what we're doing is we're teaching people about their smart bodies, how to listen to their body, and how to nourish it in a way where they're feeling autonomous. We're helping people to self-actualize the ability for them to help them heal themselves, giving everyone the tools, giving them a toolbox of different things. And like I said, the endocannabinoid system, the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. We're just scratching the tip of the iceberg. But as clinicians, it's important that we know this. So when patients ask us, we can answer. And if we don't know the answers, then we need to be able to point them in the direction of clinicians that do. And that's literally my mission and my vision, is to relieve suffering, improve quality of life. People are making great medicines. People are selling these amazing products and formulations, but no one's truly interpreting how to use them as medicine for patients. That's what we do as nurses. We interpret and we make it safe and we make it comfortable, and we handhold and guide them down the path of self-actualizing their ability to heal.
Yes, and that's very much the healing aspects of it. But of course, there's other things. For instance, I'm also on the American Herbal Products Association Cannabis Committee. And there, it's probably important, and I will send you after our show today for your organization to know, to share to your group, that right now in the United States, Senate and House of Representatives, there is a law they're putting together, which is called an MPL, which means mandatory product listing. And unfortunately, if this goes through, it can have a lot of vast implications in the entire cannabis industry in terms of access. So that's another whole, portion of this. Yes, like you talk about, it was fabulous for you and it helped you and you got excited, which is so good. And you want to help others with that information. But if it becomes even more difficult in a legal path, then, that's not a good thing. So I think we should be activists against allowing the passing of the MPL.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, my wish and hope for the future is that this will be at, garden stands. People will go to the, the roadside garden stand and, like the vegetable stand. Like this will be, it's a plant. It is the most misunderstood plant in the world. And the more I delve into the research and the science and work with patients and see the real world evidence of lives being changed and transformed, I just can't keep my mouth shut about it. It's just, no one should suffer. Everyone deserves to feel good. Part of my mission too is to really decrease that stigma around what it means to feel good and be high. There's a huge stigma right around that word. And so what I invite people to do is think about high in a different way. Think about H is for hope, I is for inspiration, G is for growth, and H is for healing. Because the first thing that cannabis brings to so many different patients is hope. Hope that things could be different, right? And when they have that hope, what happens? They're inspired. And when you're inspired, you're filled with spirit. So allow the spirit of plant medicine and the wisdom to enter into your body to stimulate you to what? To grow. Hope, inspiration. G is for growth. Growing in health. Growing is an action word. And it literally only comes from being inspired and nurtured and cared for. So hope, inspiration, growth, and healing. H is for healing. Healing isn't the absence of illness or disease, but it's doing the best you can with what you have right here, right now. And everyone deserves to feel good. Everyone should have access to this plant. It is safe. It works. There's just a huge misunderstanding and a lack of education on the safe application of how to use it as medicine. And so that's what we're here as nurses to do, is to change that dialogue. We're here to be the change agents. We're here to change how we approach and take care of patients.
Well,
Truly.
Thank you so much for sharing that great information with us. And we've been speaking to Nurse Sherri Tutkus. You can find her at holistic, with an H, caring.com. And Sherri, we have another show in a few weeks, which will have a full hour, so you can go into that a whole lot more. I want to thank you listeners for tuning into Herbally Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For further information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamhi at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Stay healthy.